Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Understories with me, your host, Lindsay. This week we're talking all things AI and architecture with Keir Regan-Alexander, founder of Arka Works. Arka Works is a London-based creative consultancy that specializes in the built environment and AI. AI and creativity is a hot topic right now, and many are worried about how the landscape for creative work will change with the advent of artificial intelligence. For those of you who are a bit nervous that we'll be replaced by robots, this conversation is for you. First of all, AI is going nowhere, and for Keir, the need for architects to embrace AI and adapt to the changing landscape has never been more important. And while he highlights the importance of staying informed and keeping up with new AI developments, he also encourages architects to focus on their unique value and specialize in specific areas to differentiate themselves in the market. I can't agree more. From my perspective, AI is a tool that should allow us to be even more creative by taking away much of the remedial and technical work that eats into our time. In fact, after this conversation, I got much more interested in incorporating AI into our own work at Cloudfields. And to be truthfully honest, it's been amazing. It's saved us time, it's allowed us to get things done much more quickly, and also leaving space for us to bring more creativity into our work. Keir is also extremely open about the challenges and rewards of running his own business and his definition of success. It's a really interesting conversation about work and creativity and embracing the power of technology. And I hope you enjoy it. Before we get started, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating or review wherever you're watching or listening. Tell a friend, and don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified about future episodes, which come out every other Tuesday. And now, let's chat with Keir. So, Keir, welcome to Understories. Thank you so much for coming on. It's really nice to have you. I thought for people who haven't met you or don't know what you do, you could give us a little introduction about your work, what you do, Arka Works, and all that kind of stuff to kick us off.
Great. Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
My name's Keir. I'm an architect by training, but I've recently set up a business which is all about preparing the architectural profession for change driven by AI. And really the way I'm seeing this is a pretty major disruption to the future of the way we work. And I really want to make sure that architects are on board with the change and sort of leading from the front and feeling empowered by it, rather than leaving the future design of cities to computer science, which I fear is what could happen. So my background is traditional practice, but I've also had a sort of growing over the years interest in tech and software. So I was a director at Morrison Company, which is a medium-sized practice, I would say, in London. And I worked on all kinds of different projects during my career, so sort of big housing, office buildings, health centres, schools, things like this, private houses. So got quite a broad sense of different kinds of practice and different ways of working, from the very analog model making through to very sophisticated digital twin kind of BIM level 2 type projects. And yeah, I guess what I tend to say to people is that I felt like when the first time I tried ChatGPT, it was like it does feel a bit like magic, and I couldn't unsee it. Going back to work, even the next day, I was immediately thinking of all the things that would change as a result, and that's just a sort of a large language model. But you know, in architecture, we work with images, so a lot of the work I do is image-based using diffusion models. And there's a wider landscape.
What's a diffusion model? Because
that's like Midjourney or stable diffusion.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's called diffusion because it turns random noise into images and they diffuse into focus.
Wow.
It's a really amazing process. Incredibly intriguing once you start going down the rabbit hole. And then there's this whole broader set of things which are more in the sort of parametric world, I suppose, but made simple suddenly. So you can do lots of master planning, strategic work with there are some very good generative design tools. So I'm blending all of these things together and seeing what it means for the way I work, and then just doing it in a very open book approach so that practices can learn as well. So I don't keep any of it secret. It's not proprietary. I just share it all. And so the work I'm doing is now under Arka Works, it's going off and I have relationships with lots of different practices, but also with software companies. So I actually work on some of these tools in developing those, and also with real estate clients. So I'm sort of, what I see is a need in the middle of all those important parties to sort of pick up ideas from one domain and move them into the other, and sort of communicate between those places to make sure that it's getting into the right hands and being used in what, there's sort of good and bad ways to deploy this stuff, and so that's what I want to make sure happens. And it's incredibly exciting time, as every week there's something new that's popping up, and just keeping on top of it is kind of a full-time
Yeah, I
job,
was
to
going
be
to say,
honest.
how do you keep on top of it? Because it is such an ever dynamic situation now. I don't think even people know how to kind of keep up to date. So as someone who's supposed to
Yeah,
be, who's expert in it, how do you keep on top of it?
that is part of the problem for practices, I think. There's just a lot of stuff constantly
Yeah.
being barraged. Something I say in my workshop is when these models are trained, they get about 10 times larger in terms of their abilities and parameters each time. And when they're
Right.
sent off into the wild, they don't know 100% what they're going to be used for, I think. And so they get released, and then people start playing with them, and then they find they can do all these new things. And so you get this sort of rolling release of new features, new things that have been built, that kind of feels like it's just a rolling wave that doesn't, it's not a sort of once it comes in and it goes out. It just feels like every couple of weeks there's something
Yeah.
new happening. So, but as a framework, I think it's useful to just, when you're seeing something new, put it into a bucket of, okay, how does this fit with what I already know, what I've already tried? Like, is what I'm seeing generative AI? Is it using Midjourney? Is it using some other parametric tool? How is the thing I'm seeing, how has it been made? And if you have some fundamental knowledge around that, you can work it out, and you can demystify it to some extent, so that at least it doesn't feel completely perplexing.
I think it's
So
like
yeah,
I think that's the challenge. I mean, for someone like me who doesn't, I mean, I've obviously I've used the various AI tools that are sort of in my wheelhouse, ChatGPT, etc. I've even had a look at Midjourney, but I was like, I don't even know where to start with this stuff. And I think it's like, do
yeah.
you think that people are generally quite overwhelmed by even where to start with this stuff? I mean, especially if you want to bring it in, sort of, dip your toe in.
Yeah.
How do you think? Yeah, I mean,
So
how do you work with that?
I mean, you say you just use ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is the most profound piece of technology. It's so phenomenal. If you're using the
Yeah,
latest model and you have the plus
it is
version,
amazing. It is
um,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and I think almost the challenge is it's sort of there, and it's so powerful. It's just remembering to use it, I would say.
Mm.
So, and
Mm.
then I think people probably underestimate how many things they can um, use it for. So
Mm.
any given day in practice, there's almost there's many things that it can help you with, and it's not just about speeding up. It's changing the way you actually work. So say you do lots of writing, it's very good for having someone to read and review your work and tell you where you're doing well and where you're not doing well, or ideas that
Yeah.
you might want to consider.
Yeah.
I do this thing where I write a lot, so I might write a long article, and I can transform that into many other forms quite quickly using GPT very effectively.
Yeah.
So, for example, take a long form essay and turn it into 10 smaller blog posts. It's really good
Yeah.
for that, or even like 20 tweets. Not that I tweet, but it can do this sort of thing very well. So
Yeah.
then what you need to do is just look at your practice and just think of things that you're doing that are kind of pain points, and try and work out, is there something here that I could turn into a process that's repeatable?
Mm.
The big one for architects now is bidding. It's been a long kind of held frustration, I think. The way we bid for public work in the UK is a lot of
Mm.
technical submissions, and they're very wordy, and it's like doing an
Mm.
exam. They're in a way that they have a certain scoring criteria. You have to harvest case studies and past answers to write new ones. This sort of thing is
Mm.
incredibly sped up and made better by things like GPT.
Mm.
So, and then with the image models, I mean, a lot of the work we do is image based as architects. So if you think about your design process, like what things could you hybridize that you couldn't bring together before, whether those be references for images or art or drawings or models. You can pull these things together and blend them and go down new avenues. So yes, things are faster or they're more productive, and that's that's like great, that's exciting. But I'm more interested in how they've changed and what new routes you might find through a project. That's exciting for me.
So what are you seeing then? I mean, obviously I know it's a never-changing thing, but your current practice is really about, as you say, working with AI to educate people and how to use it to sort of capitalize it. But then do you use it in your own practice? So does Arka Works do its own projects as well and using AI to help
Not currently,
deliver?
no, but
okay.
So all of the stuff I do is, well, either hypothetical or for a friend, I suppose. I do work, so it's a lot of what I do is working with other practices just in a traditional way as well. So I mean, I was a design director, did a lot of appointments and legal work, a lot of technical work as well. So I'm working alongside a few smaller practices, just as a architect, really, with a lot of experience.
Yeah.
So I use it in those settings all the time, and that keeps that I do that because partly I just enjoy working with those practices, but also it's keeping my head in the architecture game, as it were, and keeping it alive and current. So I think that's really important, that if I'm going off and exploring this other technical realm that's more experimental software, that I'm also keeping up with and enjoy. And I fundamentally love architecture. That's my first priority in a way. Professionally, it's not like I've abandoned it, and I kind of think this might be some sort of temporary detour where I do come back and there's a new practice in there somewhere. That could be where this thing goes. So at the moment I'm sort of off exploring in the wilderness, and because there's a lot of people who need assistance and need to be able to navigate this. It is like we've all kind of like someone just turned the wheel and went off course, and it's like, okay, really. How are we going to navigate now?
But I mean, that's the question for you, because how are people receiving it? Because I mean, whenever we're talking to people about AI and using it, ChatGPT, yeah, that's fine. It's great for text and all that kind of stuff. But like actually using AI for, as you were saying, like strategy or doing, I think when we first met and you were showing me some of the tools that you can use to do master planning and do different room types and all that kind of stuff or bright to light exercises that would cut out serious amounts of time in working with consultants and things like that. How are people responding to these things? Because I imagine there must be some sort of element of protectiveness about design or drawing or things like that. How have you found it so far?
I do these sort of half-day workshops, and you go from people often start with the sort of narrative arc of the session feels like it begins with sort of shock and awe and sort of terror. And then you kind of go through you break it down so it's sort of more simple. And I think architects can often look at stuff and think, well, hang on a sec, that's what I do and I get paid for that. And then if you go a bit deeper, you realize that whatever the tool is it's not actually replacing what you do as an architect. And if you're doing your job well, you're acting more as it's really about the value and quality of your ideas and your ability to communicate and synthesize many competing priorities into one vision and one direction. Whereas a lot of the stuff is quite mechanical, but it's not just there to speed things up, but to improve the experience for, say, clients. So if you come at it from their perspective, for example, there's a tool that's very good at laying out offices now. So if you do workspace strategies and you lay out different types of office meeting rooms and open workspace and breakout space and things like that, it will produce options based on the numbers you put in, and it's a very good system. So architects might look at that and say, oh, that's terrible, that's what we do. But I don't think that's design. I just think that's sticking bits of area into a box in a way. And if that's what you think architecture is, then I think you're practicing a little bit wrong. That's not really where your value is. So it causes you to question, where are you valuable? And then maybe you should lean into those things a little bit more. So I think the sort of baseline competencies of technical compliance and being able to produce drawings quickly or in certain efficiencies, like those aren't really going to be things that you compete on in the future or that give you a USP. It should, I would hope, it comes down to how good your ideas are and how helpful they are to the clients and how good your service is to the clients and how good an experience it is for your clients hiring you. So that could change. Like maybe we'll need to become much more focused on our service to our clients. That could be a different relationship in the future, because actually there'll be maybe a broader range of people that could provide that baseline service as a result. So I think in what I see from people's perception is they're kind of like freaked out a little bit, and then some people do just go into like they do just head in the sand kind of thing, like this is all too much and I'm just not interested, and that's fine.
I'm not gonna lie, I do kind of feel that way a little bit myself. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah. But then you also need to think the graduates coming out of university are all very fluent, so the nature of work is going to change.
Yeah. And actually managing those people is going to change, right? So thinking about how you have to understand what they're doing. Yeah.
You have to understand it, and if you're going to make policies around it, you need to understand it and you need to have used it. But what I find is at a certain point you'll put it all in a creative person's hands, and particularly some of the tools that I prefer where you're using your own drawings and you're not you're really directing the model, and they suddenly it clicks and they realize, oh, there's a whole load of stuff I can do now and this is going to be really fun, and and that's a really nice moment. And that's kind of where I don't really push what I do. I don't really mind if people aren't interested. That's totally fine, because I sort of just lay out the evidence in a way and just lay it out for people, and it's like, if you find this interesting and you think this can help, then great, I'm here to go on that journey with you. And if you don't like, that's also fine, and just carry on, kind of thing. And that everyone has to make that choice for themselves. I think the latter choice is a very high risk strategy, but in the longer term, because I think only certain types of businesses can get away with ignoring this sort of thing. And I would characterize them as like very artisanal business models or designers. I think if you're working in any way in the mainstream, then you need to be developing strategies around this now, because really active people are doing that.
You bring up a really good point there, because what about the sort of the small design studios, the ones that are 10, 15 people, that, I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, but with like the advent of using BIM to use it in smaller buildings and stuff like that, that's made smaller practices be able to deliver much more complicated projects than they used to.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I hope so. I think that sounds good. I think BIM is an interesting one, because it's been, I think someone said it's 20 years old now, Revit, and technically, and like BIM policy is probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And it's been a really arduous and difficult technical upgrade for all architects. And I don't know that it's really delivered on all of its promises. Yes, I think in theory that technical hurdle and monetary hurdle to get up to that level is very high. So just having a Revit license, you need to have a certain turnover for that, because it's very costly. So I think that's technically true, but I think a lot of small practices work in very simple ways. They tend to use low cost 2D software with maybe SketchUp or something, or they make models, and actually they just do it like they've always done it. But there might be a new time where small practices can leverage themselves now and step up and say, do you know what, we're really known for, say, high quality housing, and we've only ever done 50 or 100 homes, but we actually feel like we could take on a master plan now. And a client might feel, they can do it now. They couldn't do it before, but that is a very exciting thought to me. I really like that idea, because it sort of changes the game a little bit, and it maybe being huge is a slight liability in the future, and you're better off being more nimble and quick. And that might be a thing, is that people scale through software rather than just size in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting, to be honest, because I think there is so much fear about getting bigger when you're a small practice, that you end up, it becomes that thing where you create a a financial beast that has to be fed. You choose projects that you're not so interested in because you have to keep that financial sort of threshold going. But you're right, there's some opportunity there to actually be able to do bigger projects and something slightly more interesting without having to take on to become that sort of large practice or to kind of go that trajectory, which maybe is not so attractive.
Yeah, it's hard to undo it once you've done it, isn't it? If you go big.
Yeah. So it can be quite. Someone I was talking to a few weeks back was saying that I think in the pandemic before the pandemic hit, there was something like, I mean, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but there was like 11,000 practices in the UK, right, of architecture practices. And then after the pandemic, there was 14,000. Apparently that makes sense. A lot of people like left. Don't quote me on the numbers. I have to go back and look at it. But it was like a huge gap. But he said that like 80% of them were like 3 people or under. So there's like this huge demographic of studios that have started that are small.
Yeah.
But then they're wondering how they can scale. And this could be an opportunity for people who want to stay quite tight.
I would say so, yeah. If you've I mean, yeah, basically, particularly in master planning and housing, things that are prototypical, I think there are things I'm seeing that would definitely enable you to scale and manage many hundreds or thousands of homes, say, in a master plan in a way that you just couldn't have done before without having built a very complex sort of grasshopper integration. And yeah, I think that's true. And I think also with architects, they usually have the sort of classic career arc is if you set up your own thing, you are one person or you're 2, and you have to go through the gears. So you have to start with, I don't know, house extensions, and then you have to win your first education project, and then someone will trust you with, which is a bit ridiculous because a lot of those people that set up those practices probably were coming from working on, I don't know, 30 or 50 million pound projects or something. And they're more than capable of just carrying on at that scale. They just need the infrastructure around them.
Yeah, that's so true. So what excites you about the future of AI in architecture? What is the thing that, I mean, I know it's, as you said, it's like it's changing all the time, but where do you think it's going to go?
I mean, there's the sort of the reduction of drudgery, I suppose, is a thing people talk about, and that would be good. A lot of my time, particularly the more senior I got at Morrison Company, was not in design per se. Like really had my head, you'd have lots of projects, but like how much of your week do you actually get to spend on them, because you're doing a lot of other stuff that's more mechanical. So that would be nice, I think. And but I'm conscious that that's sort of the very optimistic view, and like often there are unintended consequences of new tech. So I've been thinking a bit about something like Twitter, which had such a like optimistic start, and everyone, it was. I remember the sort of Arab Spring was a great piece of PR for Twitter, and it was all about giving voice to everyone and democracy and things. And now I just think it's a sort of breeding ground for really hatred and extreme beliefs, and it's sort of changed the brain of everyone in some weird way, and politics too. It's sort of changed a lot. So there's all these unintended consequences of all this of new tech. So that I am super optimistic, and I just my personality would tend to just see opportunities in all this stuff. But there is this other side, I suppose. So yeah, I guess as a baseline, like I hope we get to do less boring stuff and spend more time on interesting things. I think we probably need to focus on in what ways we're unlike an AI or a bot, and we have to probably drill down more on the humanness of our work, and try and we might end up focusing more on it, because that's the thing that we have to bring to the equation. So if much of task work, so for example, Revit is a really complicated tool, I think it's likely that an AI will drive Revit for you in the future. So you will describe, say, a facade system with different parameters that you need, and then it will just build that family that you can then play with. So it's doing you have the idea, it does the mechanical bit, and it feeds it back to you. And it takes something with like 1,000 dials and buttons into something that's maybe 10 buttons that's very easy to use. So that would be cool. But yeah, spending more time on ideas, spending time on focusing on the quality of something and the value for a client, I think would be a good use of our time. And maybe in the end, like valuing the things we do that are unique, that as humans, as long as we're working for other humans, I think that's super important, and more than ever in a way.
I've been trying to think about how to ask this question, but I guess I've been working in architecture for a long time and design, and you see in a lot of generalist practices this sort of emphasis on drawing and production of drawing and things like that. But I mean, even when we were talking on guerrilla tactics and stuff, there's this emphasis for architects on the doing, on the delivery of the drawing and getting these things done. But there is some reticence, I find, to really being willing to put a stake in the ground or to be really clear with what kind of work you want to be doing. That there's, especially at the small to medium sized practice, there's very much a generalist mindset. Like they'll take what comes to them. The actual being really clear about what they want to do. Do you think that, it's kind of a complicated question, but will AI in this way force that kind of shift in thinking, as you're saying, about what value you bring to the client, being really clear on what value you bring to a client, because the thing that they think people are coming to them for isn't really going to be the thing anymore?
Yeah, I think maybe what you're describing is how architects are they have to have quite a general range of skills. So like jack of all trades would be a disparaging way to describe it, but maybe what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Master of none.
We have to know a little bit about an awful lot.
Yeah.
And so you do, and also architects tend to think that they can do everything as well, probably. So if a client, often clients would say to me, like, so what is your specialism? What would you say your thing is? And you'd be like, well, we do a bit of this, we do a bit of that, and you can hire us for anything. And we were quite a mixed use practice. They are very mixed use. But I do think it's interesting that certain practices that have worked out their, someone like Howard Tompkins, they're a mixed use practice, but they really cut their teeth on theatre work, and they've really earned their reputation through that work. And what an amazing sector to be active in and to be specialised in. And I think that's a really, in terms of I think being general for everyone is probably not a great business in the longer term. But having something that you are really exceptional at as your backbone is a very good strategy. So I would look at, I'm thinking about Howard Tompkins because I think there was a post about them just last week about the founding directors of sort of stepping back a little bit now and passing on to the next generation. But you sort of know that's going to work because it's such a great practice that's been set up, and there's a sort of portfolio of experience there that is rooted in real deep specialism in a particular thing. So I do think that's a really good strategy for small businesses to just to become known for one thing really, really well, and then start adding more strings around that to that bow. But I think trying to just start off and saying you do everything is, our clients have found they tend to want to, I've had clients say, oh, we didn't think you did that because you didn't have a section on your website. And it's sort of really interesting, wow, okay. And we don't want to have million sectors on our website, but that's how they think, is what do you say that you're good at, and then we'll think of you for that. And clients want to put architects, I think, into sort of little buckets. They're like, oh, that's the architect that's really good for this, and that's the architect that's good for that. So it makes selection easier. So you have to be conscious of that when you're pitching. Which bucket am I going to get put into? And just be thoughtful about, what you say the client will listen to. And so if you say that you're really great at delivery, or you're really technically minded, that's what they'll think of you for. But if the problem with the answer being, well, we do a bit of everything, is then they'll never really know what to use you for.
I heard someone say, don't be the best, be the only. And I was like, I love that. It's hard to do that in architecture, because there are going to be people who do things just as good as you do. But I think having that as a smaller pool to compete against, as opposed to just everything.
Do you know about the red and blue market theory? I think.
No, what's that?
So most architects operate in a red market, which is or red sea, I suppose you could describe it. So that's a very hostile and competitive market
Okay.
because we're all offering sort of similar services to a sort of finite number of clients, and there's a lot of us. And so what happens is architects try and describe themselves as like unique in some way, but that's what happens in those sorts of markets. Everyone has to market them in such a way that appears to be unique, but is actually because they're hiding the fact that really fundamentally they're all offering a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
In a blue market, you're actually probably not competing with many people. So think about that like a sea with just like, I don't know, a dolphin swimming through it, rather than like a sea full of angry fish. And can you put yourself become sort of in a space where you are one of only a few people, and that's basically what you get in those spaces are more monopolistic behaviors from businesses, like for example Amazon or Apple are actually technically in blue markets because they're not really
competing.
They are their own competition. And what those people do is they say it's really competitive, but it isn't. So they do the opposite. It's a really interesting phenomenon, but basically, every capitalists talk about free markets and things and like wanting competition, but the real capitalists, the ones that really excel, that end up being the biggest things in the world or whatever, are the most profitable, tend to have worked out how to become a monopoly. That's an unfortunate truth, I think.
God.
Yeah, it's a bit dark, isn't it? But I think you can transfer. You probably, if you think about that for architecture, it's like, okay, well, how could you tailor what you do so that you're still going to be fundamentally in this similar space, but like, is there a thing that puts you into a bucket of maybe one or two for certain types of work, which I think is what I was describing with Howard Tompkins, for example. And there are many other great theatre architects out there, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about your own business then, because what are your plans for it? Why did you start Arka Works in the first place?
I think I was coming to the end of a project cycle. So I had 4 or 5 projects finishing on site and a couple kind of coming to a big milestone. And projects they take such a long time and they're huge commitments. So I was probably looking ahead at the next series of big projects and thinking this is like another 6, 8, maybe 10 years of time to get to the end of that one. And the project I finished last year, it was one of the very first projects I'd worked on at Morris Company as a sort of senior architect when I came in, and that was 10 years. Very complex project, really interesting, and it's finished great.
That must be quite an amazing thing to see, especially after 10 years, to stick it out to see completion of that.
Yeah, it was great, and I'm very proud of it. And what I would say in the final few years, I was really just a distant onlooker watching a great team deliver it. But if I go, I always try and park my bike near the project and have a good look at it. And there's a few of them that went up last year that I'm really, they're great. I'm really proud of them. But so then the question is, do I want to do that next? Do I want to do it again, or do I want to twist? Stick or twist, I suppose. And I always wanted to have my own business and set up my own thing and direct, I guess, my energies in a way that I felt I was choosing always. So I had an itch, and timing wise, it felt like the right time to do something like that. And then when I think I'd also been nurturing a sort of growing interest in software and tech, and I'd learnt to do a bit of coding with Python in the evenings, and I'd also done courses on products, because I think I have some frustrations with being just purely service based as an architect. Like I'm interested in more product design and product development as a way of thinking, and I probably have always thought about services in a similar way. And so I'm very interested in blending those two spheres. So there's a lot of interesting thinking around tech products and how they're built, and I'd like the idea of lifting that and bringing it into architecture. So it felt just like timing wise where I was at, that this was a lot, and it took me a few months to get to Arka Works, I think, because I kind of knew it was in this realm, but I hadn't worked out exactly what that would be. And And in what I would say is like the startup philosophy, which think I'm following, is you make something and you see if it's useful, and then if you then you tweak it and you iterate, and
Yeah.
that's how I'm treating this. Is I had a sense that that there was a need and that I could provide real value in this specific niche. And now I'm working very actively with clients, and I'm just listening to them, and then they're saying, well, actually, I don't really need that sort of thing. I need more of this. And then you tweak what you do, and then that will help, that it sort of compounds in terms of how you deliver. And so, and it takes you in slightly new directions, and you have to have that iterative, open-ended philosophy in order to follow your nose. Otherwise, you'll just have a fixed mindset, and you're going to just do what you want to do. And actually, it's better to listen and try and do what other people need. So that's that. So in terms of where I want to go with it, I'm pretty open-minded. I probably have I'm probably thinking about this particular iteration of Arka Works as like the first, like the V1, which is probably 1 or 2 years. And the scene is going to change a lot. The landscape will change, and I would like to think that I can change the way I'm working with that. And it might, I'm very interested. I did a startup in March that sort of failed. It wasn't a spectacular failure, and I learned a lot. But that might be something that I would like to do in the future, is actually start building products and go for funding and try and turn it into try and release an actual product. And so I talked to a lot of startups. So that's because I love early stage strategy and product development. And I actually think architects are very good at it comes quite naturally because we think very strategically about design from the beginning. So I think that would appeal to a lot of architects if they were interested. Or maybe there's an architecture practice to be discovered that's, for me, that's maybe doesn't have some of the things that used to frustrate me about practice somehow. Can I come up with, can I use this method of working to find a practice that I think is like worth existing? Because I think I didn't want to just make another architecture practice that was. I think there's so many great ones out there, and I admire.
Well, you're saying it's a red market. It's a red market.
Yeah,
it's consistent.
What am I? Should I go create another one? Like I could, but like, is the world going to thank me? Probably not. So I'm actually, what I probably do now is I work with a few small practices, and I think they're exceptional and lovely people, and I just want, I'm very happy to help them succeed. And maybe there's something else in the future. Well, I don't know, but yeah, I kind of see there being a fork in the road, which is like, okay, let's do a product, or let's do it, or let's do a practice, but let's do it differently. So if it's okay with you, my business plan is only 2 years, I think, currently.
I think that's how most business plans should be, to be honest. I think sometimes when people go into setting up a business, they go far too far in the future. And you're right, it's so iterative in the early stages. You really have to test what you're doing, and actually if people want it, and if it's useful. And I also think like there's something, because we're going to celebrate our 4th birthday in February.
Wow. Congratulations.
I know, it's insane. But I think the thing is I think you get to a certain point. Someone was telling me like your 3rd year of business apparently is when you really start. It's actually one of the hardest, because you actually realize what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And so you start kind of stepping away from stuff that you used to do before. So I think these early stages, all the business books will tell you, you start with a business plan, and, you work out what you're going to do. But I think, I don't know if that really works so much anymore. It's like, the Eric Ries model of like testing and failing and moving quicker is kind of the way you have to do it now. And I think you have to have some sort of trajectory, but I don't think you have to be so fixed early on, because I think then you become too rigid.
Essential purpose and mission, right?
Exactly.
I suppose my mission is to prepare the profession for change, and it's AI driven change, right? So if that's my central focus, like I can deliver that through many different ways.
Things.
Right now that is educational, and it's co-piloting and helping people with adoption and planning how they transform their work. But once that phase is done, there'll be another thing. And and it might be that maybe then the mission needs to become like more outlandish and bigger, and that would be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that makes sense. And no, I'm it's just me. So are you
Yeah.
too?
We're two. Yeah.
Yeah.
No plans to go any bigger in the meantime. But I think that is a big shift too, is that moving from one to two is, I also realized
Yeah.
how, when you're doing things on your own, you get into habits and things
Yeah.
that you don't realize are not scalable or can
Yeah.
like facilitate any sort of sense of growth. So that's been a challenge. But I also think it also leaves you open to be doing the things that you want to be doing more, which is, maybe not so much of certain things within the business. It's an
Yeah.
adventure, isn't it? And I don't think that
Yeah.
you go into it with any mindset that like it's going to be a cakewalk. But I mean,
No,
it's hard.
it's hard. Yeah.
It's really hard. When did you start Arka Works? Because you said in March you did a startup, but like when did
Yeah.
you get cracking with this?
So I handed my notice in January last year, and then I went
Okay.
down pretty quickly into part-time because I was on a very long notice period,
Yeah.
which was, I think was a good fit because I didn't
Yeah.
actually, I kind of knew I knew I needed to go do something, and I needed some time to work out exactly what that would be.
Yeah.
So I needed a bit of a soft landing, as it were.
Yeah, completely.
So and then I think I had 2 days a week, which I then used to work on this startup idea with two others. And that was around, the idea there was to create a toolkit for analyzing retrofits remotely. So looking at people's homes. I did Passive House, so I was looking at, could we digitize Passive House for existing houses and then create
cool
a sort of
idea.
retrofit roadmap
Yeah.
for people. There's a few products doing it, I would say, or similar, like in kind of the similar range that we were in. And what
Yeah.
we found when we spoke to customers, they were really interested in the assessment, and they were like, oh, that's great. But then when we costed all of the options, they were like, oh, the ROI on this is terrible, right? So if you
Oh,
externally insulate your home, I think we worked out it would take something like nearly 90 years to actually win back the energy savings in the capital cost from the capital
gosh.
cost. And so what happened was people were just saying, well, I'll put the loft insulation in because that looks really high, good ROI. And they
Yeah.
weren't going to do any of the other stuff. And, for the particular business model we were thinking, that wasn't really going to work. So we
No.
had to come up with I think it was probably, Baz, I think, is probably pivoting more towards a fintech version of it, which wouldn't have been a good fit for me because I'm much more in the sort of design solutions world.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience to go through all of those early pre-seed stages, I suppose. And almost, there's this phrase in tech called like pre-mortem, which is come up with why something doesn't work before you bother doing it. So you
I
just
love
come up,
that.
you have to be like, how will this fail? How will it fail? And so that's a good way of, so, and it's quite useful in design, actually. If you're working on a project, you're like, okay, let's work out why this strategy is a bad idea, as well, in your mind, rather than just thinking about the upside. So and did that, and then I was like, okay, this is great. So then that gave me the idea for Arka Works after that. But it was all, and the other thing was, like, as that was happening, like all of the generative AI of 2023 was booming, and I was playing with all those things and thinking, I just want to do more of this. So yeah, that was how. So I'm only, like, I think 4 or 5 months into actually,
oh my gosh,
practicing trading, as it were.
that's exciting.
It is. It's been really fun.
What surprised you in these 6 months about running your own gig?
I think it is pretty scary. Yeah. Like, I was definitely having some sleepless nights in the run up to launching, because you sort of think, oh, what happens if I do this and there's just nothing, and there's no clients and there's no interest, and then it's just crickets, But then you help. But then you start, winning work and doing work and as soon as you're active, you just feel great, and you don't, that fear just goes immediately. and then it doesn't feel scary at all. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
But you do have this. I have this moment every morning where we're like, if I don't get out of bed and do this, there's literally nothing is going to happen, and that is quite
Yeah.
weird because that's the
Yeah.
first time I've ever had that. It is like, oh, it's all on me now.
Yeah. It's like amazing freedom, but it's also
Yeah,
like terrifying to have it because you think, yeah, if I don't get out of bed, if I don't do this, then nothing's going to move forward. But
yeah, but it makes it. I mean, I find it very rewarding just having
mm,
that ability to go in whatever direction you're interested in going in fundamentally. Like
yeah,
that's a great privilege to be able to do it.
yeah, it really is. It's really, yeah, that's really interesting. Um, so what does success look like for you then?
I think, yeah, my answer to this would be similar to what if someone said like, what is wealth or something. Like for me,
Mm,
freedom is the goal that we should all be aiming for, and that's the same for
mm,
me in business. So like, if freedom to choose what you want to spend your days working on and thinking about, and
yeah.
that's, time on earth is limited. You want to spend it
Mm,
on things that are really, really, super passionate about and motivated to do.
mm,
So that is, I think, my definition, and that like a business is a vehicle hopefully for that,
mm,
that for you to like will it in the direction that you want to go.
mm.
I'm sure often people have businesses where ends up kind of it's like you can't control it and it sort of ends up controlling you,
Yeah.
and so that would be unsuccessful, I suppose. If the
Mm,
question is what is success, is like, can I keep it so that um it's really just being able to go in that direction that you want, so that your brain is constantly on things that it wants to spend time on. So that's kind of my thing.
mm,
Is I genuinely, and it sounds really cheesy, but like, or kind of weird, but like I'm often thinking about being at my desk and what I'm going to work on when I get back to my desk. Like and I'll be like in the shower, like, oh, when I get to that desk, I am gonna do that thing first, or whatever it is. And
that
it's
I think is a hallmark of success if that's what you're doing. You're like, yes, I get to go to work and sit down at my
it is
desk.
yeah, no, genuinely, like, I mean, it's so lame to say it out loud, but it's true.
No, it's not lame. I think that's the way it should be. I think business should be, we should have our businesses be, yes, they are hard. They're like, there are sleepless nights. It is challenging,
Yeah,
but we should be excited to show up for work every day because I
yeah,
think it's the thing is when you're passionate about the thing you're doing, it's the thing that keeps you showing up even when you're like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to
yeah.
be able to get through this. So that is, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's the hallmark of success. Um,
Good.
yeah, I agree. I'm on side. We usually finish up episodes with a few quick fire questions. Are you game?
Oh, okay.
You,
Yeah,
you
I'm
can't
game.
plan. I
I
didn't.
hope I
You
have
can't.
some answers.
You can't plan for these.
Okay.
Let's see. What can we do for you? Let's see. I've got about 10 here, which I won't give for you. But okay. So, what architect or architecture studio do you most admire and why?
The project, Grafton is coming into my mind. There are many.
Mm,
I love actually two Irish practices. I love O'Donnell and Toomey, and I love Grafton.
mm,
Um, I yeah, if I were to look back in time, I have come back to Frank Lloyd Wright. I think as in, I think when I was studying, I was like, everyone's like, oh, you should look at Frank Lloyd Wright. And you're like, yes, I should look at Frank Lloyd Wright. And then you look at it and you're like, yep, I think I understand that. That's great. And it's a funny one. It's sort of like 20 years later, coming back and learning about it again.
mm,
There's all this stuff I missed, and I think is really amazing. And like I fantasize about homes in sort of forests and things. So I think there's a few answers there, but like historically, I love Louis Kahn and I love Frank Lloyd Wright's
mm.
work, and then I suppose contemporary practices, yeah, O'Donnell and Toomey and Grafton. I'm gonna probably say both of them together if it's one
Mm.
super practice. Yeah,
It's like a super band. You see?
yeah.
um, what's the most unusual source of inspiration you've had in a project to date?
Unusual. I try to think through my projects. I suppose at Morris Company, we were always making things and carving things, and we would. I'm trying to think of I'm probably not going to come up with an exact example, but I do like the idea of splicing things together. as for inspiration. And I think it's great to pull things from completely different realms than architecture when you're designing. I guess recently I could think of a few. Like, I did this thing recently where I was playing with material palettes and mood boards, and I was using Hockney's Bigger Splash painting as one part of the inputs for that. And this was a generative. I was doing it in Midjourney, and I love that experiment because it gets this color palette of materials that I asked for, but it does them in a way that kind of is inspired by the color palette of his painting. And that's the sort of like, that's not strictly in the architecture realm, although it is quite a cliche that architects like Hockney, and it is a painting of partially a house. But it's more just saying like, oh, the color theory of that painting is great for this material palette. So that's the sort of thing that's the kind of experiment you can do with these tools that I love, that I think is really cool. I'm trying to think of other examples from actual projects.
I think that's a great example. No, I think that's a wonderful example. All right, if Arka Works had a mascot, what would it be? Everyone laughs at this question. They're like, oh God, I don't know, a Labrador? I don't know.
Meerkat?
A meerkat?
Yeah,
Why?
I like meerkats.
What
sort of curious, energetic, friendly, and yeah, if people ask me my favorite animal, I'd probably say something like a meerkat. Like, I love watching meerkats at the zoo. And then I thought of my little boy Theo. He could be my mascot. He's sort of like a meerkat.
Probably super enthusiastic. How
they're
old is he?
very sweet. They're very cute. My boys go to school and they're like, they say to they said to people in their class, like, have you heard of Arka Works? It's architecture and AI, and like, it's so hilarious. They're and I'm like, don't, like, I was like, guys, it's just not a big deal. It's just dad. It's like, and we're just, it's like, it's just me. It's not a bit, like, no one knows what it is, and they're like, oh, it's such a big deal. They're so sweet. So maybe they'd be my mascots. 6 and 8. Oh,
they're like your biggest fans. That's so cool.
Well, oh yeah, it's sort of, yeah. They are adorable. So yeah, maybe they could be mascots too.
You're big mascots, okay. Oh well, Keir, this
I'm not giving you single answers. I'm sort of giving you like 3 or 4, so I don't have to. I'm hedging my bets.
No, I think this is great. I mean, the reality is that there's never one right answer anyway, is there? So it's all good. But yeah, no, this has been so interesting, and I could talk to you about all this stuff for ages, because I think it's so curious about where things are going to go. And I don't know. I think it's really cool to have something like what you're doing, which can help kind of, I guess the word is, usher architects through this process, because I think they are going to be a little worried about it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's every profession. It's not just architects.
No, it's true.
We've all got to get ourselves organized. Yeah. No, thanks very much. It was really fun.
My pleasure. No, it's great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks again to Keir for coming on Understories. I hope that you've all come away with some peace of mind about the future of technology and hope for how it can improve your life and work. Once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, all those sorts of things. Episodes drop every other Tuesday. Until then, be well. Understories was produced by Cloudfields and Kieran Fowler, the music is by Aves, and the branding is by Joe Jones. See you in a couple weeks.